So first, let's talk briefly about the stack sizes and the bounties. So we are the biggest stack, but we're basically tied with 2 other stacks. Then there are a bunch of middling stacks, 1, 2, and the rest of the guys are on the shorter side. There is no super short stack though. As for the bounties, let's see. So the biggest bounty is on me. And the second one is on Hans, who is one of the bigger stacks. And then Drew has a very large bounty as well, who is one of the more middling stacks at 40 big blinds. So let's get the action rolling. First hand, Queen 3 suited. Yep, definitely folding against this action. 10-9 suited. As we know, the big stacks want to be calling a lot, not 3-betting, and now we are basically tied with the opener, so we definitely want to be calling. On the flop, we could bet or we could check, both options fine. This hand is mostly supposed to mix, so we end up checking. And on the turn, we face this very small sizing. And I think out of position's sizing here should mostly be on the larger side, because he doesn't want to bet too many middling hands here with ICM. His betting range should be mostly polar. I keep using mostly, but that's the truth. It should, for the most part, be polar. Not everything, but yeah. The most prevalent sizing should be the larger one. So I do think this is a sizing that we get to attack a little bit. Our hand seems like one of the few raising candidates we want to have here. We don't have many raises for sure, but I do think along with some of our value, like some pocket fives, maybe some ace 5 suited, 10-9 of spades is the go-to hand. So I go for a raise, and we get the fold. Perfect. Ace king, raise and take it. Jack 8, yep, folding against an open and a 3-bet. 10 and off, we are opening from the hijack. Again, we want to be opening very wide here. We cover everyone. And 10-9 definitely makes it. Big blind defense, and this will just be a range, but for us, we have so much ace-x that he doesn't have. He ends up calling, and the turn is a queen. So in this spot, while the queen is good for our range, we still have a super, super wide range we started with pre-flop. As I said, we range betting the flop. So we just have so many garbage hands here, whereas the big blind, after calling our c-bet, his range is more condensed and stronger. So I do not think the queen is a card where we get to range bet. And a hand like 10-9, I think can go either way. I can see merits for betting, of course. We start making perhaps a queen indifferent, a flush draw gets to fold, but at the same time, I can also see merits for checking because we can improve, and our blockers aren't the best. I rolled passively and ended up checking, and here we would be bluffing if it checked to us, but our opponent jumps instead, so now we just have a very easy fold. Next up, we have ace 3 suited, raise and take it. Pocket queens, we face an under the gun 1 open of 20 big blinds. His bounty is 5.5 starting bounties, which is around 200k. So one starting bounty would be worth about 40k chips here, since the starting stack was 100. So yeah, around 5.5 big blinds. So it's not insane, but it's a decent portion of his stack in comparison with his stack size. So I do 3-bet queens, and we get it in against jacks. Yep, I think very standard get it in from him. As for us, I could see us calling a lot, and queens, I think, is one of the hands that benefit from 3-betting the most. Kings, aces, I can see being primarily calls. But yeah, queens, no. Queen 6, we get to defend against the late position open. If you remember, Drew was one of the shortest stacks with a large bounty. He had over 8 starting bounties. 8.2 or so. So definitely a spot where we want to be defending very, very wide. And Queen 6 seems like a good enough hand. Against the c-bet though, we just have nothing, so we fold. Then Queen 6 suited. We are facing a button open from the second stack. Now this is a spot where we want to be calling very wide, yes, but we also want to have some 3-bets. Because we are so deep, the risk of us getting jammed on is fairly low. So these kind of low suited queens, I think, perform very well as 3-betting hands. So I ended up 3-betting and we get the fold. And to have a look at the solver, so button supposed to open 53%, fairly wide. And against that, we still have a small blind gets to play. So calling wide, yes, calling like some Jack 9 off, 10 9 off, like 5-3 suited, 6-4 suited. And as I said, these low suited queens, low suited kings are very good 3-bet candidates, along with suited connectors and even some like Jack 9 off, 10 9 off, King 9 off, offsuit A6. We're going to be 3-betting 19%, so a fairly wide 3-bet range. If we believe the battle is a bit tighter, then we should start narrowing our 3-bet range as well. But yeah, Queen 6 suited looks like a fairly decent 3-betting hand. As for his response against our 3-bet, I guess that's also worth checking. His response looks like this. So not much 4-betting, no jamming, and a bunch of calling. Now, because we are the two biggest stacks, he doesn't really want to put too much money in preflop by 4-betting. And at the same time, because he ends up calling hands like jacks and ace-queen suited, he can also call weaker kind of hands. So again, this is a spot where all the ranges are very wide. He opens wide with 3-bet very wide, and he gets to continue wide against our 3-bet. This is a function of the risk premium just not being super high. If we look at this, his risk premium against us is only 10%, whereas in an LPSK tournament, it would be up to 80%. Not 80, up to 20%. Jesus, I misspoke so badly there. And it even took me a while to realize what I said. No, I read his stack size, but was 80 big blinds, and I said 80%. No, his risk premium here is around 10, and in a non-BSKO tournament, it would be around 20%. So double that. Up next, we have a very interesting hand. We open Jack 10 suited, and we get 3-bet by the short stack on the bottom to this kind of sizing. His bounty is 5 stunning bounties, so around 5 big blinds at this point. And the question is, what do we do here? And I generally think this will be a very, very value-heavy, nutted kind of range. I don't think it's going to be ace-king. I think it's mostly going to be queens plus. So against a range consisting mostly of overpairs, I don't think this kind of hand gets to make it. I decided to fold. And let's see what the solver says. First, the GTO version. What position are we? We are under the gun 1. So we open, and the bottom gets to play like this. So he's not really supposed to have many 3-bets to begin with. He's mostly supposed to jam and 3-bet like kings, some ace-king suited, some aces. And against this kind of range, our hands are just going to be very, very break-even, these ones, like slightly losing. Now, I don't think these are very realistic ranges. Like, I don't think people are going to be calling aces in this spot. I don't think they're going to be like jamming queens or 3-betting non-only with ace-king suited. So I also locked this. Here we go. To basically being like queens, kings, aces, and then some ace-10 of ace-5 suited as the bluff. I think people won't be bluffing with other hands. I think they will just be bluffing with some ace-10 off kind of blocker thing. Ace-jack, I think they just jump. So we're even doing badly against the bluffing range. And against that, you can see that we don't really like calling these 10x because we're just dominated by the bluffs. Now, you could make an argument that maybe he has more like king-jack off in there and not so much ace-10 off. But then Jack 10 suited is dominated by king-jack offsuit as well. So I think no matter how you range him, you are dominated by his value and by his bluffs. So these kind of suited broadways are just not going to be good hands to continue with. Suited connectors, yes. Suited kings and aces, sure. But not these dominated broadways. Then we have 10-3 suited. We defend and just check fold. Aces. 3-betting against the bottom. This is a very similar spot as the one we saw before. Aces definitely want to 3-bet. Then kings, and no action here either. Queen 5 suited, we defend. I think 3-betting here could be a consideration, but we should mostly be calling and just completely break the flop, not even the back to flush draw. This king 3 is a fairly interesting spot. So we get to jump very, very wide because of the small blind stack. So the small blind has 4 big blinds. His bounty isn't relevant, but the big blind's bounty is very large. So because the short stack, I mean, his bounty doesn't matter much, but the big stack has a large bounty, we just get to jam super, super wide in this spot. We don't care if the 4 big blind stack calls, and we also don't care if the 20 big blind stack calls, because his bounty is just very, very large. He has about 9.5 starting bounties, which is like 38k, so 7 big blinds. So you can see any kind of blocker hand or suited connected hand pair we just want to be jamming. And king 3, we get it against 10-7, and we don't win. Pocket tens, we raise, big blind defense, small size and range bet, and just shaking it down and winning against ace-9. Even though we have the 10 of diamonds, I think our hand is just a bit too strong to be bluffing on future suites from these positions. Maybe if we were like under the gun. Pocket deuces, we open, and against this jam, I think we have to fold. It will just be a fairly strong range and have a bunch of pocket pairs. So I think we need to be a bit stronger to call off here. Jack deuce, we are checking back. We don't really want to be isolating suited hands that cannot call a limp raise. On the flop, we need heart to be betting. Jack deuce just doesn't quite make it. On the 10, though, now that we pick up the gut shot equity, I think betting is fine, checking is fine. We just want to be mixing. And yeah, folding river. King queen suited, raise and take it. 9-6 suited. This is a fairly interesting hand. So we get to open super, super wide here. We cover everyone, and the short stacks have reasonably large bounties, so they can't play back it as much. Big blind defense. And if we remember, the big blind has like 8.2 starting bounties, which is like 330k, so around 6.5 big blinds. So I thought on a flop like this, given how large his bounty is, it makes sense for us to have some jams. And I thought 9-6 suited made sense as a jamming hand, because we have back to flush draw, the gut shot, and over to a 7. So I ended up jamming and getting the fold. However, I was wrong. We have the solution here. And we can see that after check, we just don't really have jams. We don't even get to range bet this board. Because, again, the source stack's risk premium is fairly low. So 9-6 just wants to check back for the most part, because it can't really bet call. But yeah, we're not even supposed to use many half pot sizings. We're just supposed to mostly go small. Next, we have pocket fives. This is another very interesting spot. So we open fives, and the big blind goes for a 3-bet. Now, this is a spot where I don't expect to get 3-bet a lot, but I do think pocket fives is doing reasonably well as a hand to continue with. Our opponent's bounty is around 6 starting, so it's not too much. It's worth like 5-ish blinds, but maybe a bit less. But I do think we still get to call our pocket pairs. So I call 6-7-4, and we face a half pot c-bet. Now, this is not going to be a range bet for the big blind, but I do think it can be easy to mess up and end up range betting. So because of that, I thought a hand that on one hand needs some protection against the high cards, and on the other hand can improve against his value range makes a lot of sense as a jam. Let's see how wrong I was. So first, about pre-flop. We are under the gun, right? Yeah. So opening very, very wide, any pocket pair. And big blind is supposed to play like this. So as I said, not much 3-betting. Just kings, aces, ace king suited, and then some middling suited hands. Ace king off, not really there too much. Against the 3-bet, we continue like this. So pocket pairs calling, suited connected hands calling. As you can see, we're calling very wide. I would have definitely overfolded a bit in game. Now, on to the post-flop spot. First, the GTO version. As you can see, this is just a fairly bad flop for the big blind. He's supposed to bet very, very rarely. It's only at 21% c-bet. Against this, we don't get to jam a lot. We get to jam with some like pocket 8, 7, 8 suited. So this kind of value hands that can actually improve. Ace 5 suited, 4, 5 suited. However, as I said, I think it's a fair assumption to make that our opponent will likely be range betting here. He had ace king, as we saw on the replayer. So I don't think my assumption is very far off. Now, against the range bet, here's what happens. We get to jam a lot more with value hands like 9s, 10s, jacks, as well as some like ace queen, ace jack. We can see these hands with the backs of flush draw are jamming a lot as well. But pocket 5 still mainly want to call. There is some jamming in there, and the EVs will be super, super similar, so it's not punt. It can never be a punt to get in with the open-ended straight draw with the pair as well. But yeah, this is how we're supposed to play. And against the jam, yeah, he's calling kings, aces, even calling some ace-king suited, which are doubtful. But yeah, I think with my assumption, I am fine with jamming here. And the takeaway should be that when people make the mistake of range betting, on this kind of boards, we get to attack that by jamming a lot of hands, as we saw in the node lock scenario. 9-4, we are folding ace 8. So this hand that can 3-bet or can call, I think both options fine. I would rather 3-bet slightly worse, like a6 off, a7 off, and mostly call with that. Big blind jumps and bottom re-jump, so yeah, we'll just have to fold here. Ace queen, standard open for us, and big blind defense. So this is going to be a board that we get to check back a lot, and ace queen definitely the type of hand that we want to be checking. On the turn, facing a small sizing probe, we just kind of have to continue. We have a bunch of high cards as outs, and potentially could be winning too. On the 10, which completes the straight and the flush, just no real decision for us at this point. King deuce, small blind limps, we check this back. And on the flop, I decide to stop. This will be a very passive board for both positions, but I do think we get to have some bets with a hand like this. So I would be rolling like a 30% stub frequency. Small blind folds, queen 5 suited, we raise and take it. Pocket 8s, we raise and take it. 5 deuce, we can ISO here. The hand is just supposed to be mixing. I roll passively, and yeah, folding on the flop, we have absolutely nothing. King 6, we raise and take it. Again, covering everyone, we get to open pretty wide. So king 6, sure, let's go. Queen 7, we defend, and I think flop is fairly close with the backdoor flush draw. I ended up folding, but in hindsight, I would have liked to continue. I think backdoor straight, backdoor flush draw, 1 overcard, just a little bit too strong to be folding here. A7. This is a spot where we want to be raising very, very wide, and A7 is a hand that is raising like in a cheap EV, non-ICM situation. Here, just has to be raised. Then we have pocket 9s. So I open, and we get 3-bet by the bottom. This is a very interesting spot that plays very differently in PSKOs compared to normal final tables. So in normal final tables, we know that we don't really want to be jamming pocket pairs because they're doing really badly against the value range. However, here, where we have the bounty incentive to get it in, as we said, his bounty is on the larger side. It is, where is he? Here, 8.2, which is like 350k or around 6 big blinds. We want to expand or get it in range, especially with pocket pairs. So I decided to end up jamming. We want to go more linearly and less polar here. Let's look at the sim. I am under the gun, so opening very wide, 31%. And the bottom's range looks like this. So for 3-bets, he wants to have 10s plus for value, and then mixing some suited 9x, some low suited aces, some ace jack off, king jack off, ace queen off as well. So Against this kind of range, pocket nines are indifferent. They mostly call, but jamming is pretty much same EV. We'd rather jam low suited aces and slightly better pocket pairs. However, I do think people's range will mostly not look like this. Here we go with mostly again. For example, I don't think there will be 3-bet calling pocket tens here. I also think their bluffs will come more from ace-10 off, king-jack off hands, king-queen off, and less from like jack-9 suited, king-9 suited, and so on. So what I did was I node-locked this range. Let me see, here we are. So I changed it to this, where I didn't really remove the suited nines, I just added more ace-10 off, king-jack off, ace-jack off, king-queen off. And against this range, now we can see that our pocket pairs just really benefit from jamming. So yeah, I think it's more likely to be towards the second range. So jamming nice, I am very happy with. 6-3. We end up overcalling because we cover both of them. And with ICM, our equity realization will be very high. But on the flop, large c-bet, not much for us to do. Ace-queen, I think we mostly want to be calling here. In a normal tournament, non-PSKO, we would be 3-betting a bunch, but here, keeping in the blinds that we cover and the button, I think makes a lot of sense. On the flop, we face a c-bet, and I think it should be a board where Lena just gets to range check. We just have deuces, threes, and fours that he doesn't. We have 5-6 suited, but he doesn't. So I think you should be very careful here. Ace-queen just wants to continue. And we are looking to check down and ace-jack. Yeah, I think ace-jack, especially without a spade, just doesn't really get to c-bet on the flop. Then we have ace-6 suited, so I open, and the bottom 3-bets. Again, we spoke about his bounty quite a bit. My thoughts here were that, again, this will be a fairly strong range, and I'm doing badly even against the bluffs. Like the bluffs will be some ace-10 off, ace-9 off kind of hands. So I'm dominated by the bluffs and I'm doing badly against value. So I thought this is a spot where we want to go line here and fold this kind of hand. Now, I was wrong. Here we are. Am I under the gun again? Yeah. So under the gun opens and button plays like this. So I locked this kind of range for him. So some ace-10 off, king-jack off. Yep, I think looks fairly reasonable for bluffs. And against that, we get to continue like this. So we can see that ace-6 suited actually still wants to jam or at least call. Even against this fairly strong kind of range with dominating bluffs, we don't really get to fold against the sizing when we cover. I think the key part here is that his sizing is just fairly small. And his bound is fairly large. So these two combined just don't really let us fold much. You can see we're only folding some terrible offsuit hands. We're not folding almost anything that can flop a flush draw. So yeah, in hindsight, I think jam or call, both fine options. Folding, no. 7-9, we defend and check fold again. We've check folded like 5 times to his button open. Very sad. A6, as I said before, this is the kind of hand that we want to be 3-betting a lot because it's not strong enough to call. So yeah, 3-bet folding this. Then some more pocket nines. Facing a 55 big blind open, we of course want to be calling. We have a 2 top stacks. On the flop, I think checking back sometimes is fine. Stubbing also fine, small sizing only. And on the turn, I think we get to stub again. We basically want to stack off some overpairs that will not be check raising and charge potential draws that he picked up with the broadways. Sadly, he folds though. This hand is very fun. So we face an open from the button who we cover barely. And the small blind 3-bets of a 34 big blind stack. Again, his bounty is like 10.5 starting, which is like 450k, so around 6.5 big blinds. And we have ace-10 suited on the big blind. So the question is, what do we do here? Is this hand strong enough to 4-bet get it in? Well, yes. I think we can 4-bet get it in with a lot of aces here. By 4-bet get it in, I mean 4-bet to a non-all sizing where we don't fold against the small blind. So ace-5 suited, ace-4 suited, these all seem like very reasonable hands to do that with. But ace-10 suited is doing well against the bluffs. So I think that this is the kind of hand that we actually want to call the 3-bet with. As we've spoken about, in PKOs, we want to be calling 3-bets quite a lot when we cover, and the risk premium on the final table is lower, so again, this allows us to just call 3-bets. If we look at the solution, so we have button opening and small blind 3-bets range that looks like this. So the usual top range and then some ace-9 off, ace-10 off, low suited aces. We actually get to call quite a bit from the big blind. So we're calling ace-jack suited, ace-10 suited, ace-9 suited, some aces, some ace-jack off. We are getting it in with, as I said, these low aces once we 4-bet and small blind jams, then we're not really folding anything. So it's not that ace-10 suited cannot get it in. It can. It's making more money getting it in than ace-4 suited, of course. But it's performing better as a flat call. So I thought this was a very interesting concept in PKOs that even on the final table, even when the opponent is a fairly short stack and 3-bets, we still get to cold call the 3-bets in position. So I ended up calling, and on the flop, small c-bet sizing, backdoor, straight draw, flush draw, overcard, sure, let's see a turn. And now, just trying to check down, our hand is a bit too strong to bluff, and yeah, of course, folding against the jam. So the outcome, not the best, but I like that I found the call. Next up, we have ace-king, we raise, big blind defense, half-pot range bet, and he folds. I think when we're covered by the small blind, we won't be super wide here, so going for a half-pot bet seems reasonable. 7-5, we defend and check fold as usual. That's what we do every big blind. King 5 off, we get walked. Jack 10 off, we open, and the button calls. So the stack size have changed a bit now. We have the same stack as the button, and the big blind is the other similar stack, and we have two shorter stacks. Definitely a spot where we want to be checking super high frequency. Jack 10 seems like a clear check. And on the river, I think we want to have a bunch of bets, and small sizing makes sense against the non-capped range. We are trying to target some maybe king 5 suited, some pocket 7s. These are the hands that we're making indifferent. And of course, we want to have a bunch of straights into this small sizing as well. King 8, we fold against the jam. Look, we couldn't defend and check fold the flop. 6-3, we open. We want to be very wide here. We cover both players. On the flop, I think this hits the small blind's calling range quite well. Queen Jack, Jack 10 have connected, suited connected hands. So we don't get to bet a super high frequency here. I think our hand could go for either way. Bet fine, check fine. I don't think it matters much. I roll the check, and then on the turn, we start betting. The 5 is good for us because we check back every single 5x. So I go for a large sizing and get the fold. King 3, we open, big blind 3-bets, very clear fold. Queen 8, we defend. And against the c-bet, hey look, we don't have a check fold hand. I think this kind of hand with the Queen of Spades and also the 8 of Diamonds makes for a really good check raise candidate. We have backdoor straight draws, backdoor flush draws, and overcard. Just looks like a very good check raising hand. And we get the fold. Ace-9 against the cutoff is one of the hands that wants to 3-bet a lot. So we looked before, against the buttons range, we want to 3-bet more like Ace-6 off, but against the cutoff range, which is stronger, we also want to 3-bet a bit of a stronger bluffing range. So Ace-9 off, I think, makes a lot of sense to go to the 3-bet range. King 8, we open and fold to the jam. Next King 8, we check back. Against the 20 big blind stack, as we know, we want to be fairly polar and not use these middling hands as ISOs. Facing a stop here, just no real decision. We have to fold. King Queen, we raise blind versus blind covering. King 8, raise and take it. Ace 8, raise and take it. Queen 8, big blind defense, c-bet and take it. 3 deuce, I think we just fold even if we cover, just too bad of a hand. King Jack, raise and take it. Ace deuce suited, we open the cutoff. We will be very, very wide here, covering everyone. Button calls and the blinds fold. So this will be a range check flop for us. We will be opening super wide here, so we don't want to be putting too much money in. Now, once the button check backs and we get a 9, we definitely want to start betting. Our hand is just so strong, and I expect in position to check back a lot of ace-x as well. So 70% sizing, I don't think we want to go any larger. The river pairs the ace, and I think our decision here is fairly interesting. So I can see checking having some merit and allowing him to bluff some like Jack 10 suited, Queen 10 suited kind of hands. So I'd rather bet they had like, ace king than ace deuce, because ace deuce just blocks a little bit more. But based on how my opponent was playing, I think betting would just accomplish more. I think he was a bit too call happy. So I decided to go for the sizing, and he called very quickly with 7-9. I think it's a reasonable calling hand, but yeah, good that I ended up betting instead of checking. Ace 8, we defend. And yeah, so on the turn, I don't think we want to be betting too much with a hand like this. I would be betting a lot, probing a very high frequency. But Ace 8, I think, just has a bit too much showdown value. Now, against the bet, we end up calling, and on the river, just fold. I think raising turn could also be a good decision. So just mixing, as usual. Kings, 3-betting, we don't want to be calling that much here with these kind of hands. Maybe trap aces, but kings seems like a 3-bet. Queen 8, raise fold. 7-8, definitely folding. Jack deuce. We don't want to be folding almost any hands here. I think Jack deuce doesn't quite get raised. Like Jack 5, Jack 6, decent raising hands, but Jack deuce, I think, just limps. And on the flop, I decide to go for a range bet because I think it's very likely our opponent will be overfolding in ICM. So here we have a lot of small hands. I think it makes a lot of sense to just jump to the more interesting, bigger ones. And speaking of bigger ones, this is a very interesting hand. The stack sizes are very similar. I am the big stack, and we have another large stack, and then 2 very short stacks. Folds plus on the small blind, and this is a hand that we just want to be raising here. We want to be raising a lot, and ace 10 suited, definitely a hand that can induce. We raise, opponent calls, Jack deuce 3. So this looks like a range bet. Our opponent will not really call much deuce x or 3x, so range bet small. He calls, turn is a 3. I think ace 10 just makes a lot of sense to check here. We beat a lot of hands, we want to get to showdown. And we are facing a bet. Now, I would be folding some of my ace-x, but I think ace 10 is just a bit too strong to be folding. So I end up calling. River is the 4 of diamonds. I check, and our opponent jumps. So here, I actually had some interesting thoughts. First, what does his value look like? And I think his value doesn't have much jack-x in it. His strong jack-x, like king jack, queen jack, ace jack, will jump pre-flop or raise flop. A hand like Jack 7 probably doesn't jam river. Maybe sometimes, but I would assume mostly not, because it's just going to be a value cut sometimes. But then a lot of his flush draws or straight draws, I think, are very natural turn checkbacks so that he doesn't get jammed on. Again, I'm not saying he will never have these hands, but I do think they're very, very reduced. At the same time, he has all of the queen 9 off with a diamond, king 9 off with a diamond, like queen 10 off with a diamond, queen 8 off with a diamond potentially. So many of that type of hands, some club combinations even that call the flop, like 9-8 of clubs. So all these hands, I think, add up and potentially lead to him over bluffing. We also have the bounty effect where we're just more incentivized to call. So I ended up calling and he had queen 10. I also ran this spot to see how far off I am. And okay, flop, range bet. Yep, so far so good. Turn is 3 of clubs. And ace 10 suited, yep, just checking, betting only with the flush draws. Our opponent is only supposed to bet small. And we can already see some like queen 9, queen 10 are supposed to mix in checkbacks, which seems unlikely. After the bet, ace 10 just continues. You can see actually no ace high folds here, like king 10 folds, but that's it. Then on the 4 of diamonds, our opponent is supposed to give up some queen 9, is always supposed to give up queen 10, supposed to give up like 10 9 with the diamond. So he's actually supposed to give up a lot of hands that don't have showdown. At the same time, he's supposed to jam like jack 7. So I do think that he's going to reach the river with more bluffs, like bet turn with more of the 1 diamond hand that's supposed to mix checks and bets with. I think he's going to bluff all of the non-showdown hands and potentially have less value because I think maybe king jack always raises the flop or queen jack does the same and maybe he doesn't jam jack 7. Even against the GTO range, you can see ace 10 is basically indifferent. It's mixing in calls sometimes. So with my assumptions, even if they're not like 100% correct, but even like somewhat correct, ace 10 does end up becoming a call. And yep, it ended up working out as well. So then we have a lot of, again, uninteresting hands. One hand is this one where the bottom jumps for, what is this, like 16 big blinds. And I think I have almost no ICM pressure on me, and his bound is fairly large. As a reminder, it's like 10.5. So about 5.5 big blinds. So yeah, I decided to get it in and sadly lost to ace 7. Then a bunch of more uninteresting hands. Let's see. Okay, we get this one where I open. Again, I'm one of the bigger stacks. Now I'm no longer covering. Brazil is the chip leader, so I will be somewhat tighter, but a6 definitely gets to open. I range bet small, opponent raises, and here we mostly just want to call. a6 does very well at keeping in all the worst hands. First, you will have worst flush draws, but even straight draws like 10-9 has very low equity against a6. Turn, check, check. I think I could start betting. I think either option is fine. And on the river, I decided to go for a jam. I think I would have a lot of flush draws here, but then also a lot of natural bluffs with 1 heart in my hand. So I think developing a jamming range in the PSKO makes sense. But it doesn't really matter because he had a flush himself. So no matter what I did, this was just a very unfortunate cooler. And we reach heads up. So for the heads up match, I don't want to go through the hands too much because, again, the bounties just doesn't really matter. I guess I can show like the 2 biggest ones. The first one being this one with king 4, where we open big blind calls and we see bet small. He raises, we call. We turn trips, and then we just end up calling down against queen 9. Not too interesting. I mean, we just trips and click the call button. Then a bunch of very small ones, and the final hand being this one with pocket 5s, where I limp and he jumps for 17, and we call, and we run pure against king 6. So I think we saw some very interesting mechanics in the final table regarding how we respond to 3 bets and how wide we can open, all those kind of things, as well as some post-flop sims. And yeah, this wraps up the first hand history review. For the next chapter, we will review another PSKO hand history, this time a bit of a lower buy-in and a larger field.